Sorry if this setup looks a little bit janky. This is kind of wobbly, might fall, who knows. Anyways, I'm jumping into it. I have this friend, and she was talking to me about how I have these standards in relationships that were just really unrealistic and really, really high. And this is actually something that I've been told a lot in my life. Like, a lot of people used to tell me, they were like,
Oh my gosh. Duh, you're gonna like die single, cause
I have really high standards. I don't know if they're unrealistic. Personally, I don't think they are because I don't feel like I'm asking for too much, but a lot of people think I do. So,
Let's talk about it.
I don't know if you guys are anything like me, but I watch a little too much true crime. And I think that's also part of the reason why I'm like, this is why I don't feel bad about having standards that might be through the roof to some people. I don't think that my standards are too high or anything like that, but I personally think that having standards that are higher than what the normal or average person is willing to deliver is actually a good thing, because I think that it saves you a lot of drama and a lot of headache. And I'm really tired of seeing really amazing people tell me, or even just witnessing them throughout like everyday life, clearly settling. And not only are they clearly settling, they're telling me that they're settling. So this isn't even just me like assuming that they're settling. They're literally telling me that they're settling. And the reason is that a lot of people would rather be in a relationship that's not all that, but at least they're in a relationship, than be alone. And I think that we kind of need to unpack this fear of being alone, because the way it's taken so many people, just like by storm. Like, you will see these amazing people who will rather be in the company of somebody that makes them miserable, somebody that makes them insecure, or even just, I mean, they don't have to be the worst, most terrible like human being alive, but you know that they are not what that person is worthy of. They're not on the same level, if that makes sense. And it's intimidating to be somebody who has really high standards when people around you are constantly telling you that you're gonna die single. Because that's, first of all, if you've ever said that to somebody,
Don't say it again.
because it's really discouraging, but it's also so untrue. And it's really insensitive to say to somebody, because if people like me who know that we have really high standards, we know that it's gonna be harder for us to find somebody to decide, okay, this is the person that I want to spend time with. Sorry, I'm waving my hands around so much. I am a hand talker. But we already know that. We already know that we are not just going to walk down the street and just find like so and so attractive just that easily. And not even just attractive like in terms of physical appearance, you know what I mean. It could be whatever, but something that attracts you to somebody. We already know that that's kind of hard for us, and for some of us, some people don't like that they have such nitpicky standards or something. But the mistake is when people feel like they've been kind of bullied or pressured by other people around them, male or woman, to then lower those standards. And then what ends up happening, you've settled, and then a lot of the times that results in a lot of bitterness and unhappiness, and a lot of that bitterness is not only towards yourself but towards the people that told you to settle and your partner. And it's not really your partner's fault if you chose to settle, you know what I'm saying? Your partner didn't ask you to settle. If you chosen to be with your partner is going to assume,
oh yeah, like, I'm what they wanted, I'm living up to their standards, I'm stepping up to the plate, you know what I mean.
so let's step back, because it all kind of starts with us, right? There's nothing wrong with figuring out exactly what are your standards, and also what you're willing to compromise on and what you're absolutely not willing to compromise on, and what's just not even a big deal overall. So the first place that I would start, and this is kind of what I had to do, is I started to think about like, okay, I want to make a list. And yeah, I actually made a silly little Google Doc. I know it sounds like really stupid to some people, but to me it was really effective. So I created this Google Doc, and I wrote about things that I absolutely really, really wanted in a partner. And I was like, okay, if they don't have X, Y, and Z.
That is non-negotiable. I have to walk away.
Or it's completely my fault if I'm unhappy in this relationship. And the reason why I say write it down instead of just making like a mental note of it is because sometimes it's really easy to get lost in what we have in our minds. You know, I can sit here and say like I want a billionaire, okay? But if I don't have that written down, I don't want a billionaire. But like if I did want a billionaire, let me do something a little bit more realistic. Let's just say like, okay, my ideal partner is a surgeon, okay? I don't know. And I could just, you know, sit there and think about it, but in combination with everything else, and that thing is non-negotiable, it's going to be really hard to hold myself to that standard, especially when you meet somebody who is not living up to that standard. So if I want a surgeon and I'm like, oh, that is absolutely non-negotiable, they have to be a surgeon, because like, let's just pretend like I really cared that much about their career. And somebody comes by and they're like the complete opposite, like, I don't know, something. I'm not trying to shade any jobs or be like this one's better than this one, but something that was not up to my standard. If I have it written down, I can look at that. That is a literal screenshot of your mind when you were in your logical form. I think when we get into a relationship, it's really easy for us to throw that logic out the window and just think with what we're seeing, our feelings. And when we're enamored by a new person, our standards can easily not matter anymore. We can easily be like,
Oh, well, that was nitpicky, and you know, my standards were too high. I've got to lower them.
but what if that standard was a very legitimate standard to have? Why would you then want to lower that standard? You get what I mean? Now, I know that the surgeon example sounds a little crazy because I feel like that's kind of messed up to just only want that specific thing, but you get where I'm going with this. If you just say it in your head, you're not holding yourself accountable. When it comes to setting your standards and actually sticking to those standards to prevent settling, you have to have something that'll hold you accountable. And sometimes it's hard to have friends to hold you accountable because our friends a lot of the time are going to kind of feed our feelings in the moment. We can easily try to sweep what our friend says under the rug, even if our friend did try to hold us accountable and our friend did try to be like, well, remember, this was what your standards were. We could easily be like,
Oh no, like I changed my mind, like I've got to compromise
and then our friend could just be like,
Yeah, okay, that's fair.
and then step back. Because also, is it really their place to keep holding you accountable if you keep indicating that that's not what you're interested in? It's actually so easy to find yourself in that situation where you'd be like, oh, I would never date somebody who does X, Y, and Z. And then you meet somebody who does X, Y, and Z, but let's say they're like totally your type in every other way. Suddenly, those standards go right out the window. And even if your friend were to try to hold you accountable, be honest with yourself. Would you listen? Are you ready to listen? The best person to listen to is your own self when you're single, not enamored or held captive by somebody with your own fantasies or your own amazement by this person. The best way to do it is have yourself hold yourself accountable. Our single selves, because they're logical, we're not attached to anybody in specific, so we don't even, like, we can sit there and fantasize about what they may look like or what they might act like or what they might sound like, but they don't really exist. So nothing is tying us to that thing. You get what I mean? So that's what I say was my first way that I kind of was like, okay, this is how I actually will never fall into the trap of settling for somebody and actually honoring my standards and telling and acknowledging that, you know, my standards may be high, but I'd rather have high standards, take a little longer to find that person, and just not have to go through 5 million different trials. It's hard to get mad at yourself. It's easy to get mad at people. It's easy to get defensive over your partner when your friends are telling you that they're not good enough for you or they shouldn't match up to your standards. But it's actually really hard to get mad at yourself, your own
Real, raw self.
who wrote that down, who thought of that and was like, this is my standard and I'm not shaking on this and I'm not going to compromise on this, you can't really get mad at yourself. I mean, you could be like,
Oh, well, yeah, I thought that before, but I changed my mind.
but deep down, if you really, really think about it, why did you write that? Because you weren't swayed emotionally. I think there's a lot of pressure on especially girls to have this sweetness about them that is so understanding and that is really empathetic and that is really, open to so many things. But I feel that in my own life, I've seen that time and time again fail so many people when they're overly understanding, when they're overly kind, when they're overly empathetic. Suddenly you start to excuse crap that you should never excuse. I mean, even me, like, even speaking from my own experience, I've done that. I've excused things that there was no way that in my current right mind I would ever allow myself to accept. But because there was that pressure to then lower your standards, what do? You think you're just too harsh of a critic, and so then you do that and then you accept crap. So I think also another important thing when it comes to actually being able to hold yourself to your standards is being able to filter out that noise and just recognize it as like,
Okay, maybe they're okay with settling, but am I okay with settling?
and really think about your own life and people around you. Do you know anybody that has settled in a relationship?
How does it seem?
Do you want to be in that relationship? Do you want a situation where you're there and you're just looking at that person like,
Wow, I personally feel like I'm too good for this.
not to say that they suck, but like, you look at them and you don't feel inspired or motivated by them. If a person doesn't make you feel like inspired and, wanting more for yourself, I don't really think that happiness is going to last you very long. It hasn't lasted me very long, and it hasn't lasted the people around me very long. And those were people who did say
That they were settling.
they knew that they were settling and they realized,
Hey, this relationship is not fulfilling me. It's boring to me.
when you settle, that's where boredom really kicks in. And I really do think that that's kind of where like toxic relationships start to happen. Even on our end, we start to kind of push away from our partners and we're sitting there thinking about a different relationship in a better world and a better light when we could have that, but we're choosing not to. We're choosing to waste our time with somebody who does not live up to what we actually want, and we know it, and for some reason we still sit there and we waste time, and it's because we're more afraid of being alone than being unhappy. And that's really the main thing that it comes down to. If that kind of just resonated with you, think about that and ask yourself, like,
Am I afraid to be alone?
and then really, really journal about it and write down.
Why do I feel like I'm afraid to be alone?
I mean, you don't have to write about it if you don't want to, because, like, I know not everybody's into the whole journaling thing. Sometimes I'm not even, but really identify your own feelings and ask yourself, why am I afraid to be alone? Why are people around me making me feel like my standards are too high and I'm asking for too much? Maybe they're just asking for too little. And you know what?
They are.
And that's why we're seeing more and more guys. I mean, we all have seen everybody talk about how men these days,
They're the princesses. They want to be the princesses.
and it's happening because women are actually allowing it to be the case. They're accepting minimum, not even the minimum. They're accepting less than the bare minimum, and they're celebrating it. So these guys are just like,
Oh yeah, like, I don't have to do anything. I don't even have to look good.
at least girls, like, if they, you know what, don't even, just never mind about that. But men are being celebrated for just blinking and breathing. So naturally, they're going to give you the bare minimum. And they won't feel like you're settling, because guess what? They're going to find another girl who will take them as they are. And they're going to be like, oh, your loss. We're always thinking about how when we lose a relationship, it's our loss. But we need to start kind of thinking like, you know what?
It's actually their loss.
Because they're going to do the bare minimum for somebody else, while I was not doing the bare minimum. I was actually working hard in this relationship. I was doing my part. I was doing my thing. They didn't appreciate that, and that's on them. That is their loss. So before you feel bad for having too high of standards, just know that he's probably going to have an easy, fun little time looking for somebody who will put up with whatever he's willing to put down. And there is. It astounds me how many times I see the most like amazing women just settle for like the most like shitty relationships, if it even gets to the point of being a relationship. But situationships, that's a topic for another day. Also, I noticed like another issue is that when somebody's been single for a while and people hear that you've been single, they like to act so surprised and they say,
Well, what's wrong with you?
when in reality it's not necessarily that there's anything wrong with you, it's just what's wrong with the dating pool just in general. If people are not good enough for you, do not date them. If people are not fulfilling that need that you have, and your standards are completely up to you. You're allowed to choose how high or how low or whatever standards that you want to set, but so long as it actually aligns with genuinely what you want, don't let anybody tell you otherwise or sway you from what you truly want. You're allowed to have whatever standards that you want, but as long as it makes you happy and as long as you feel like, oh, well, if I'm okay with okay. So here's like a good example. We hear a lot of people talking about how like, they're not okay with coffee dates. And you might be somebody who is really okay with coffee dates. Coffee dates might totally be your thing. But we're seeing a lot of people talking about why you shouldn't be okay with coffee dates or, something, cheap or going around the park or whatever. Let's say that that's something that you're okay with, but the people around you are saying like,
oh no, that's the worst. Like, that's the sign of a brokey and this and that.
and if that is not something that you genuinely agree with, don't go to that standard. Unless you really want to go up that standard, don't feel like you have to just to fit in with the people around you. See, it's kind of a both ways thing. We think like it's just about setting to sacrificing on your standard. Maybe you don't need all that much. Maybe you don't need a guy who's like super rich. Maybe you're okay with somebody who doesn't make that much money. That's fine. If that is your standard, stand by your standard. And I said that with my whole chest, but like I don't really know how that's going to be taken. But bottom line is, whatever your standards are, in your heart. Nobody can tell you what your standards should be or shouldn't be. All I'm saying is that you need to know where your heart actually lies so that when you find somebody, you can determine, is this person within what in my heart I actually really want and need? If not, they're not for you, and that is okay. Just be like, okay, I'll have a good time looking for somebody new. They'll have a good time looking for somebody new.
It's okay. It is what it is.
Relationships don't have to be like the most heavy, intensive things like right off the bat. That's totally fine. Like, this is the human experience. We're meeting other human beings and figuring out, is this person who's entering my life going to be a positive addition as a partner or not? It doesn't have to be like,
You hate them or you think they're the worst person ever.
but you just need to be honest with yourself and be willing to walk away from something if you know it's not good for you. And then also just don't be too harsh on yourself, because at some point we've all fell into this. We've all dated somebody who was just not what we actually said we wanted in a partner, and we still dealt with it anyways. It happens to everybody. Be gentle on yourself, but just make sure that you actually learn from that mistake and try not to let it happen again. So anyways, I gotta go study for my test that I have tomorrow. So good night.